Hey guys, today I'm going to give you a formula for how to maximize the blooms on your crepe myrtles. Now, crepe myrtles have a limited growing area. They don't grow in some of the colder parts of the country, but they grow in my area, zone 7A, quite well. And they're one of the most vigorous plants I have in my garden. There was a nursery that was going out of business and I bought their entire stock of crepe myrtles. So I have 25 large crepe myrtles that I planted, and they're all throughout the garden. I'm going to take you out there and show you, but I want to show you the difference this formula made. I applied it to the tree on one side, and then the tree on the other side, I applied nothing but the standard fertilizer that I put out for the entire garden. So I think it was a balanced, slow release fertilizer. And so this formula right here, you'll be able to see very quickly that it produced massive blooms and it grew incredibly fast. So let's take a look at that tree real quick. Now, about 2 months ago, I knew that crepe myrtle blooming was going to be in its full force. And what I did is I treated the tree right here on my left with the formula I'm about to show you. The tree on the right was, as I said, just treated with a standard slow release fertilizer. So as you can see, the number of blooms are huge. There are blooms on this tree, but this tree has bloomed incredibly well. It's already dropped a lot of its flowers, and there's a couple of things I need to do to it. I need to prune away some of the seed pods. That's going to add more strength and to the tree itself, and it will go back to blooming again a little bit quicker. So whenever you see those seed pods, and I'll show you an up close of that in just a sec, but the seed pods need to be removed. Now, I know that's really hard to do on a tree this size, but if you have a dwarf or semi-dwarf, that can be a lot easier, especially with a pole cutter where you can extend it out and reach the very top of the tree. So removing those seed pods is really important. But primarily, I just wanted to show you the difference of this tree treated on my left with the formula I'm about to show you, and the tree on the right just treated with standard fertilizer. So there's a big difference in the two, as you can see. So the nursery that went out of business, I went ahead and just planted these along this gravel driveway, and it makes a great shaded canopy. And then on top of the trees, as you see all the blooms. But I'm going to show you a couple of interesting things before we head back out into the greenhouse and start working on our crepe myrtle boosting formula. Let's take a look at this crepe myrtle right here to my left. Now, what you're seeing here on this crepe myrtle are suckers coming up from right at the base of the tree and sometimes from the root system itself. But these need to be removed, and I've already done this once at the beginning of the early summer, and so you'll need to do this maybe 2 times, possibly 3 by the time frost first hits. But you want to remove these to put the strength back into the tree. These will become unsightly as they get bigger, and so I'm trying to keep all of the crepe myrtles I have in just 1 or 2 main branches, maybe 3 or 4 on some of the other trees, but I just want to make them look as neat and orderly as possible. So this kind of takes away from the tree having all these suckers shooting up. So there's something you'll have to remove. Often you'll get a sucker just growing on the side of the tree. You need to remove those as well, unless you're going for a more multi-trunk look, which I don't mind it if it's well done, if the trunk has interesting shapes and things like that. But I will remove these suckers early in the summer, midsummer, and then once before fall. So it is a multi-step process throughout the year, but I think it makes the crepe myrtle look so much better, especially in winter interest when it's lost all of its leaves. Now, another common maintenance thing you can choose to do or not to do. It's not critical that you remove these, but the crepe myrtle itself will shed its previous year's skin, and so it'll just mostly fall off. But I always remove this because sometimes ants can start to work their way under there. So it's one of those pests I don't want on my crepe myrtles, having ants. So if you just go around the crepe myrtle, you can pull these off. They're super easy to remove. One thing you can do is if you hit it with a very strong leaf blower, most of this will just come off by itself because it's barely hanging on. Now, if you prune your crepe myrtle just to have a single trunk, you'll have a massive trunk like this. As you can see, I can't even get my hand around the base of it. So a lot of times crepe myrtles have a 2 to 3 inch off of each branch that's coming off the main branch, but I just wanted this specific one to have 1 main branch, and you can see that it's quite strong. It is so smooth, it's almost like it's been sanded and polished. So it's a very interesting tree, not only visually, but also when you feel of it, it's very unusual. Now, not all crepe myrtles are huge. This is a dwarf crepe myrtle. As you can see, it's only about 2.5, less than 3 feet tall, and it's in the windswept style of a bonsai. You can see almost if you think about it with your imagination, that this tree has been facing wind. So it's a unique style of bonsai, but it is a crepe myrtle. I've pruned it recently and I removed all the flowers just to put more strength into the root system. But as I said, you can have dwarf like this one, you can have semi-dwarf, and then the ones along my driveway are the full-size crepe myrtles. So let's head back into the greenhouse and I'll show you a formula that will make your crepe myrtles bloom like they've never bloomed before and become super, super healthy. So guys, the first thing you want to have is some really pure water. Now, if you have a good filtration system, you can use that, but you want to use 1 gallon of either rainwater or really filtered water. You want to try to eliminate as much chlorine and any of those other minerals, that heavy bad minerals that might be in your water. So just remember that rainwater is the best way to go when fertilizing crepe myrtles, but if you don't have the option, just use a filter. And if you don't have a permanent filter, I'll put a link in the description to a filter you can just keep around your greenhouse that you can use 30, 40 times before you need to replace the small cartridge in it. Now, the first thing we want to add to our gallon of water, we want to add a fish emulsion or this Alaska fish fertilizer. If you have a strong aversion to really strong odors, you may want to wait till last to do this, even wear a mask, but let's put 1 tablespoon of that into our gallon of water. So I do definitely want to tell you what this is good for. This has a lot of minerals in it. It's ground up fish left over from the fish processing industry. So there's a lot of trace minerals in this, and that's really critical because a lot of our soils are depleted of really, really strong minerals. So they've been leached out over time. So this will absolutely boost your crepe myrtles flowering and the overall growth and health of the tree. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to add a sugar to our formula here. Now, you can either use molasses, you could use honey, you could use 100% real maple syrup, not the processed stuff that they call maple syrup. You can use pure cane sugar, and this is like raw cane sugar. So whatever you use about 1 tablespoon and mix it to the formula. I'm going to use this right here, which is 100% pure maple syrup. And this again will feed beneficial microbes in the soil and increase bud formation and help the root system. Now, our next ingredient, commonly known as Epsom salt or magnesium sulfate, is going to enhance the color of the flowers and strengthen the flower formation in the flowers themselves. So we're going to use 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt, and you don't have to be worried because technically this is not a salt, so it's not going to hurt your crepe myrtle. Now, our next ingredient contains potassium, magnesium, and a lot of micronutrients, and that is wood ash. And if you make your own wood ash, one of the best ways to make wood ash is to use smaller limbs, not so much large pieces of a tree, but the smallest of limbs, often, especially in hardwoods, contain so many of those really positive things I just mentioned. So we're going to use 2 tablespoons of ash. If you don't have a burn pit or a place to create your own wood ash, I'll put a link in the description. I actually ordered this from Amazon just to have it around the greenhouse, but I actually have 3 5-gallon buckets filled with wood ash. One important tip about wood ash is you need to collect it before rain because all of those positive minerals and nutrients will wash out and leach into the soil if you don't collect it before a heavy rain. Now, next we're going to use used coffee grounds, and after I get through with the coffee grounds, I put them back in the original container so that way they can dry out in a windowsill, put the lid back on them, and I'll have them because I use a lot of different recipes around the greenhouse, and a lot of times they contain used coffee grounds. This will add nitrogen to the soil, and also it will help improve soil structure. So let's add 2 tablespoons of used coffee grounds, and I've allowed them to dry, which makes it easier to store. So if you do save your coffee grounds, don't put the lid back on the canister. Allow it to dry out in a windowsill, and then they'll be very dry and easy to work with, and they won't clump so much. I've made previous videos about eggshells, and they contain a large amount of calcium, but sometimes the eggshells don't break down. So I've got a video I'll put right here about using eggshells and the best way to make them bioavailable. But as you can see, this has been ground up into a powder, and the way you do that is you can either heat the eggshells in an oven or put them out in the sunlight and allow them to dry out. But make sure you wash them first, and then when you go to store it in some type of container like this, make sure it's a lidded container, but put some silica gel in there, and that will keep them from drawing in moisture, and it'll retain a nice powdery texture, so it's easiest to use in your different recipes that you have around the garden. Now, I haven't added that yet, so I guess I need to do that. We're going to use 1 tablespoon, 1 heaping tablespoon of ground up powdered eggshell. Now, there's 2 methods to applying this. Sometimes I might just in the early spring, I might apply it as a soil drench, put it in a mason jar like this, and pour it right around the root of the tree, right around the trunk. So the second way is you can do a foliar feeding. I think once your leaves have came out and you start to see some flowers, you can use a hose-in sprayer like this. It has a lot better reach, especially if you have good water pressure on your home. This particular one is a 6-gallon sprayer, so it allows 6 gallons of water to pass over before it uses up all of our ingredients in our container right here. So just remember, you may want to make it a little bit stronger if you're going to do a foliar feeding, but the soil drench, you can use it straight from your mixture of your 1 gallon. So these are really handy, and I'll put a link to these as well in the description. So if you decide you want to use this to do an overall foliar feeding on a much larger tree where you can't reach the top, these are the ideal way to do it. So this is one of the most important things you can do to your crepe myrtle, and that's removing the seed pods. Once the flowers have finished, this is nearly finished, and these will be dropping off, or they would have dropped off if I hadn't already collected the seed pods. But once the seed pods have formed on the branches and the flowers have faded, it's a good idea to remove these seed pods, because then it can put more energy, the crepe myrtle can put more energy into creating more flowers. So once it's created seed, maybe the crepe myrtle is going to slow down on flower production. Like a lot of things in the vegetable garden, once it creates seeds, the production can slow down greatly, and it'll stop producing vegetables or the flowers that become vegetables. So just remember, this is a little mechanical thing you need to do to your crepe myrtle each year, probably about mid to late summer. Now, crepe myrtles grow commonly in zones 6 through 10, and there may be some exceptions. If you do a lot of mulching, you might be able to get to zone 5, but the winters there are so cold, the roots can often freeze, and the tree just suffers in that area. So again, if you're living in zones 6 through 10, you can probably grow crepe myrtles with no problem. One thing that you need to remember is that crepe myrtles love full sunlight. You need to have as much sun on them as possible. So if you've planted crepe myrtles under other trees, you're not going to see many flowers. You may see leaves, you may see growth, but flowers are going to be pretty rare into those areas. There's 3 crepe myrtles that were planted in my front yard before I purchased the home, and they've done very, very little. I think one year I pruned them back quite a bit, and they flowered that one year, but overall they've done very little because they're in the shade of a very large pine tree. Now I'm going to put on the screen 3 varieties of crepe myrtles, and these are known for their bloom longevity and their amount of blooming. They're really known for that. And so there's some crepe myrtles that are going to be a lot more profuse with flowers rather than maybe some older standard varieties. So if you want a crepe myrtle to start out with that's going to bloom nonstop and be quite filled with flowers, use one of those 3 varieties I'm showing you right there. Now the best time to prune crepe myrtle is late winter and before the flowers come out in the springtime. But there's a very common thing called crape murder, where people will take a chainsaw and just cut the crepe myrtle off all at the same length and not give it much of a chance. What I've learned to do, and I have made that mistake in the past when I first started gardening, is the thing that I think that's the best way to do it is to cut each branch off at a very sharp angle. That way you don't have water standing on the top of them, it drains off quickly, and it can heal up a little bit better. But one of the things when I cut it off at that angle, and I try not to get it close too far down in the tree, I kind of do that a little bit higher up, so I'll need a ladder to do that. But after I do that, in the springtime we'll have multiple shoots coming out. Well, you want to cut back all of those shoots to maybe 1 or 2. And the way I like to do it is I like to keep doing the zigzag pattern. It creates a very interesting branching pattern. It's like I'll have one come out like this, I'll have another one come out like this, I'll cut this one off, and I'm just doing this kind of Z pattern all the way up. So once it matures, it has a very interesting look about it, especially smaller crepe myrtles. The most interesting crepe myrtle I ever saw, I was visiting a friend, and the crepe myrtles at the neighbor's house had been done exactly this way over a long period of time, and it had to be the most interesting crepe myrtle I've ever seen. Now when it comes to standard fertilization, in addition to the recipe we've done, you want something that has a lower nitrogen content and a much higher phosphorus content, something like bone meal. It has a lot of phosphorus, your NPK numbers, the P being phosphorus. That will definitely work better, is having a high amount of phosphorus in there. One of the best over-the-counter, on-the-counter products you can buy, and it's not organic, is the Schultz Bloom Plus. It has a very high phosphorus count. If you could find a fertilizer that has 0 nitrogen, 0, I think I've seen 0.47, 0. So that high phosphorus count is going to encourage blooming quite a bit. Now, if you're planting a crepe myrtle, you want to give it the best possibility of growing to its full potential, and you want to make the soil conditions perfect. If you have heavy clay soil, you want to add something like sand or pine bark, perlite, and quite a bit of it too, because you want this to be proper draining. Crepe myrtles do not like growing in soggy soil, so make sure you don't grow this in an area where the soil stays soggy maybe through the winter or the early spring, and then it dries out in the summer. It's not going to be a happy tree, so make sure that you plant it somewhere maybe a little bit higher up in your yard if you do have a bog area or a shallow area, low area of your yard. So in addition to being well draining, also you want a certain soil pH. It's 5.5 to 6.5, and having one of these soil pH meters will help you greatly. It's also a moisture meter, and it's also a light meter, so it does several different things, and I think the ones they have now may have 4 or 5 function on them, but this is the one I've had around the greenhouse and the vegetable garden. So you want to make sure the soil is perfect for your crepe myrtle to maximize the blooms and its growth. Now, crepe myrtles, there's several insects that cause problems for them. One is the Japanese beetle. You can have the aphids, and those can cause sooty mold. You can have ladybugs. So there's a lot of leaf-chewing insects that can attack your crepe myrtle. And one of the best ways to get it under control is you can take a sprayer, like I just mentioned, especially if it's a taller crepe myrtle, and do a mixture of 2 tablespoons of Castile soap, an all-natural soap, and 2 tablespoons of cold pressed neem oil. Spray the entire tree as far as you can get it, preferably on a non-windy day so you don't breathe any of that back in, but that will help cut back on all of those pests that are attacking your tree and cause things like sooty mold and powdery mildew. So just make sure that you give it an overall spray if you see any of those problems popping up. Now, it's very difficult to prune away those seed pods if they're up high, and I'm going to show you a tool. I use it, and it makes it a lot safer than climbing up on a ladder, which I've done that too, but using this particular tool will make it quite a bit safer when you have the full-size crepe myrtles. Now, I have to say I ordered these Fiskars pruners from Amazon. I was very happy with it because I'd been using the off-brands, and I can really tell this is a much more quality-made item. But anyways, this will extend out quite a bit, and I'll show you exactly how far it does. There's actually 2 different extension poles built into this one device. And so we go there, we lock that back, we go up to the, down to the bottom, and we can extend it out even more. Have to press the release. There's a little release button, and I'll show you exactly how high up this will reach into the tree, and it will make it a lot safer on your pruning where you don't have to climb a ladder. Now, if you have as many crepe myrtles as I do, it makes it really difficult to do this particular task. You might actually have to have some help come in if you have a lot of crepe myrtles. But if you're just talking about 1, 2, maybe 3, this is something you could do midsummer after the flowers have spent, and then you'll create a situation where they'll rebloom, and make sure you do the formula I've told you about and all the other best practices to make your crepe myrtles bloom profusely and grow incredibly well. Now, I wanted to show you how incredibly resilient crepe myrtles are. This tree was growing about 8 foot tall, and the reflection of the heat from the greenhouse had killed one side of the tree. It was just so hot in the summertime that it actually did that. So it kind of has that solar effect of bouncing back on the tree. So half of the tree had died. I cut it all the way back to the ground. That was about a month and a half ago. So 6 weeks later, this tree, there was nothing showing, and you can see how resilient it's just bounced back, put out blooms, and that is in 6 weeks. So guys, let it sit for about 24 hours, stir it well, and then you can apply it as a soil drench, or you can mix it into your overall hose sprayer to do a foliar feeding. So guys, I really appreciate you watching. If you have any questions about this video or any previous video, I hope you'll become a public subscriber first. If you have anything you want me to answer, that's the best way to get an answer, because I get 100 to 300 questions a day, and it becomes nearly impossible. Also, I'm adding extra content on Patreon, so if you want to see what I'm doing there, just come over there and you can join that. It's really a great way to connect a little bit closer, because everybody on Patreon, anything you have to say, I'm going to absolutely respond 100% of the time. So guys, I really appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.